Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Adi Madhava Kunjabi Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hadi Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Astatara Satasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaur Premanandi 2:23:22 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet. Text 22 from chapter 3, canto 3. Idrigraham tad pashyantim nati pritena chittasa sarva bhutasya yabhigya pravochat kardama swayam Idrigriham tad pashyantim Nati pritena cetasa Sarvabhutasa yabhigya Pravochat kardama swayam
Idrigriham tat pashyantim Nati pritena cetasa Sarvabhutashaya vidya Pravochat kardama swayam
Premananda.
Idrigriham tat pashyantim Nati pritena cetasa Sarvabhutasaya vidya
Idrik, such. Griham, house. Tat, that. Pashyantim, looking at. Na arti pritena, not much pleased. Cetasa, with a heart. Sarvabhuta, of everyone. Ashaya abhidya, understanding the heart. Pravochat, he addressed. Kardama, Swayam, personally. After hearing what we heard yesterday, hearing that she's not pleased. That's this morning's verse. She looked at the palace and she wasn't pleased. When he saw Devahuti looking at the gigantic, opulent palace with a displeased heart, Kardama Muni could understand her feelings because he could study the heart of anyone. Thus he personally addressed his wife as follows, purport. Devahuti had spent a long time in the hermitage, not taking much care of her body. She was covered with dirt, and her clothing was not very nice. Kardama Muni was surprised that he could produce such a palace, and similarly, his wife, Devahuti, was also astonished. How could she live in that opulent palace? Kardama Muni could understand her astonishment, and he spoke as follows. So I'm going to read several verses, as we did yesterday, because there's no purports, are very short. My dear Devahuti, text 23, you look very much afraid. First, bathe in Lake Bindusarovar, created by Lord Vishnu himself, which can grant all the desires of a human being, and then mount this airplane, purport. It is still the system to go to places of pilgrimage and take a bath in the water. There in Vrindavan, the people take bath in the river Yamuna. In other places, such as Prayag, they take bath in the river Ganges. The word tirtam ashitsam yapakam refers to the fulfillment of desires by bathing in a place of pilgrimage. Kardamamuni advised his good wife to bathe in Lake Bindusarovar so that she could revive her former beauty and luster of her body. The lotus-eyed Devahuti, next, text 24. The lotus-eyed Devahuti accepted the order of her husband because of her dirty dress and the locks of matted hair on her head. She did not look very attractive. Purport: it appears that Devahuti's hair had remained uncombed for many years and had become complicated in tangles. In other words, she neglected her bodily dress and comforts to engage in the service of her husband, text 25. Her body was coated with a thick layer of dirt, and her breasts were discolored. She dove, however, into the lake which contained the sacred waters of the Saraswati. In a house inside the lake, she saw 1,000 girls, all in the prime of youth and fragrant like lotuses. 27. Seeing her, the damsel suddenly rose and said with folded hands, "We are your maidservants, tell us what we can do for you." Purport: while Devahuti was thinking of what to do in that great palace in her dirty clothes, there were at once, by the yogic powers of Kardamamuni, 1,000 maidservants prepared to serve her. 1,000 maidservants by his mystic powers. Shoo. They appeared before Devahuti within the water and presented themselves as her maidservants, simply awaiting her orders. Text 28. The girls, being very respectful to Devahuti, brought her forth, and after bathing her with valuable oils and ointments, they gave her fine, new, spotless cloth to cover her body. 29. They then decorated her with very excellent and valuable jewels, which shone brightly. Next, they offered her food containing all good qualities and a sweet, inebriating drink called asavam. Purport: asavam is an Ayurvedic medicinal preparation. It is not a liquor. It is especially made from drugs. It is meant to improve metabolism for the healthy condition of the body. Text 30. Then, in a mirror, she beheld her own reflection. Her body was completely freed from all dirt, and she was adorned with a garland, dressed in unsullied robes and decorated with auspicious marks of tilak. She was served very respectfully by the maids. 31. Her entire body, including her head, was completely bathed, and she was decorated all over with ornaments. She wore a special necklace with a locket. There were bangles on her wrists and tinkling anklets of gold about her ankles. Purport: the word krita, shira, snanam appears here. According to the Smriti Shastra's directions for daily duties, ladies are allowed to bathe daily up to the neck. The hair on the head does not necessarily have to be washed daily because the mass of wet hair may cause a cold. For ladies, therefore, taking a bath up to the neck is ordinarily prescribed, and they take a full bath only on certain occasions. On this occasion, Devahuti took a full bath and washed her hair nicely. When a lady takes an ordinary bath, it is called mala snana, and when she takes a full bath, including the head, it is called shira snana. At this time, she needs sufficient oil to smear on her head. This is the direction of the commentators of Smriti Shastra. Let's hear some more decorations. Text 32. About her hips she wore a girdle of gold set with numerous jewels, and she was further adorned with precious pearl necklace and auspicious substances. Purport: auspicious substances include saffron, kumkum, and sandalwood pulp. Before taking a bath, there are other auspicious substances such as turmeric mixed with mustard seed oil, which are smeared all over the body. All kinds of auspicious substances were used to bathe Devahuti from top to toe. 33. Her countenance shone with beautiful teeth and charming eyebrows. Her eyes, distinguished by lovely, moist corners, defeated the beauty of lotus buds. Her face was surrounded by dark curling tresses. Purport: according to Vedic culture, white teeth are very much appreciated. Devahuti's white teeth increased the beauty of her face and made it look like a lotus flower. When a face looks very attractive, the eyes are generally compared to lotus petals and the face of a lotus flower. 34. When she thought of her great husband, the best of sages, Kardama Muni, who was very dear to her, she, along with all the maidservants, at once appeared where he was. Purported appears from this verse that in the beginning, Devahuti thought herself to be dirty and dressed in a very niggardly way. When her husband asked her to enter the lake, she saw the maidservants, and they took care of her. Everything was done within the water, and as soon as she thought of her beloved husband Kardama, she was brought before him without delay. These are some of the powers attained by perfect yogis, semicolon. They can immediately execute anything they desire. I think we'll end there. I mean, it goes on, is again short purports. Pretty amazing couple, both of them. He just desires, and voila. And his desire, appropriate for Grahastha, was for service to his good wife, obedient wife. I mean, he understood the comforts that she had been accustomed to, and her beauty and so forth and so on, and she sacrificed all of that by her own choice to be in service to her husband, and she did what he did. Now, it doesn't say if her body was thick with dirt, what was his body like? She did what he did. Who can say? Doesn't say. But she was so much absorbed that she neglected her body. She neglected her hair, she neglected her clothing, she neglected everything but one thing. And he certainly, Kardama Muni certainly recognized her devotion, and her devotion, of course, was purposeful. It was to satisfy her husband on the one hand, and to receive from her qualified husband a qualified son. So these are not inappropriate, they're appropriate desires for a qualified lady, elevated personality. And she wasn't like, had a chart. I did so much for you, you better do equal amount for me, please. There's no scorekeeping. Sometimes the scorekeeping thing goes on, but ideal is not like that. Ideal is just principle-based, and principally, she was simply serving her very, very elevated husband. He was amazed, and she was amazed. Seeing this, I mean, the description is amazing. What to speak of seeing this castle in the sky, palace, with all the embellishments. And naturally, being an elevated person, she was feeling, I'm unfit. My condition is unfit to be in this palace. Look at me. So she didn't have to say it, she just felt it. And one can imagine there was some kind of facial expression indicated her displeasure. And after manifesting all of that, at the beginning I remarked, it's like, what? Displeased. Because the palace had a purpose, or the castle, the aerial mansion had a purpose. And she's not fit, it's incomplete. So one of the details, Bindu Sarovar, is a teardrop of the personality of Godhead. There's also mentioned a lake from the river Saraswati, because sometimes rivers have a little indentation within the land, and the lake forms within the river, or adjacent and fed by the river. So that's the lake Bindu Sarovar, but also blessed by a tear of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, seeing the difficulties, austerities of Kardama Muni. So he knew, and we discussed this yesterday, when Kardama, manifested birds, not only inanimate objects, but animate objects, animate entities, birds. And now it's not just birds, it's ladies, 1,000 ladies. Now where did those souls come from? Don't ask me. Because Brahma his doing is one thing. And certainly it's an empowerment, but where do the souls come from? And where do they go to afterwards when all this was done? What happened to these 1,000 ladies? Doesn't say. It wasn't an apparition. They weren't spooks or figment of her imagination or his imagination. He was amazed and she was amazed. Now, as she was being cared for, it doesn't say she got so absorbed in indulging in repairing her body back to its beautiful appearance that she just forgot her husband. It does mention that she became again mindful of him, as if there's a whole lot going on, and she was absorbed in the whole lot going on. But the principle of service unto another is even when you're doing something on the side, or something that's not directly with the person who you're serving and assisting. Your thought is with the person who you're serving. And certainly that's Devahuti. So it's not like she had some lapse. But it is natural that while doing something, attention goes to the something, as well as to the person for whom you're doing that something. And then when the something is complete, then refocus entirely on the person. In any case, it's a nice, subtle detail. I didn't read, one could read, commentary on, when she thought of her husband, what commentators might say about the before and after effect. But devotion is devotion, and devotion doesn't mean just an activity. It's an activity, but it's unto whom? Devotion unto whom? Therefore, impersonalists don't have devotion, because there's no whom. There's no person. It's Brahman. But Brahman isn't a person, Brahman is existence. Existence. Eternal existence. Withdraw from the temporary and become absorbed in eternal existence. We're going to hear something about this tomorrow morning in the discussion about Agasura. Stay tuned. There are certainly a class of men and women, a class of people who are pursuing spirituality who have been influenced by jnanis or their limited idea of spirituality and resonate with what jnanis have to say about there's no person, there's no form, it's the quality-less Brahman. In the course of this past December month, I met 3 young men who have family members who, and they themselves were brought up as their family members were brought up in Advaitavad. I didn't ask the details about, which brand, but monism. And one has become a devotee, and then he's having resistance from his brother, because his brother bought into monism and he doesn't want to hear about person, because he's bought into the idea that that's a covering, but it's not, that's Mayavad. The form and personality and qualities and everything, it's Maya, and I'm not interested in Maya, I'm interested in Sat. And that's not Sat, because it's Maya. Asat. Asat covers Sat. And then comes the whole thing, well, how can Asat cover Sat? Anyway, let's not go there. It's very common. It's a default position for those that have a spiritual inclination to define by negation, so the process of negation, aside from the philosophical neti, it's just a kind of a knee-jerk, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, and detachment with knowledge leaves one without bhakti leads to impersonal. Therefore, very important from the very, very beginning, whether someone's like this, or like that, to bring Krishna out of the box. And some people may object. What? And then comes, your discriminating power, how to bring Krishna out of the box. When introducing bhakti to people that either are atheists, avowed atheists, or materialists, or impersonalists, and there are different versions of isms. So how to do that? Little by little, that's how. Lots of prasadam and lots of kirtan. little by little, depending upon the audience. And Prabhupada's books, and Prabhupada can say it like, and it's okay. It's okay. Then people can question and get upset because he speaks what Krishna speaks, and Krishna doesn't speak favorably about this kind of worship and that kind of worship and so forth, attached to this conception or that conception and so forth. So back to Devahuti and Kardama Muni. She remembers him, and suddenly she finds herself before her husband. And she's now recognizing even more how qualified, the degree of qualification of her husband. Not that she didn't know, but you see some external manifestations, two of them, the mansion and the 1,000 ladies that decorated her like anything, etc. Where did it come from? From her husband. So I guess you better be careful if you have a spouse that's like that. You better be careful what you desire. Who knows what's going to happen? I did a little research. I wasn't able to find anything. There was a question that came up one of these mornings about what happened to Kardama after he left in Kapila Dev and Devahuti, and what happened next. I researched a little, didn't find anything. No, we don't know. At least I don't know. But something illustrious, focused on the personality of Godhead, because that was his life. Very powerful person, with no other desire than serving the Supreme, with powers that match that desire. I mean, Vashishta had a Kamadhenu, and he just requested the Kamadhenu, and the cow could manifest anything. Right? Big feast, anything. And Kardama had the capacity himself, invested. No, it doesn't say that Vashishta didn't have that capacity himself. He was dependent upon a cow. Because he certainly displayed powers that were extraordinary, superhuman powers. Cursing the Basus and so many things. He's very powerful. In many cases, the Vedic paradigm indicates that austerity has a capacity to give powers that one who doesn't engage in austerity doesn't have. They don't have those same powers. As if the austerity is the mother and the power is the child. That arises from austerities. That's a very limited, incomplete understanding. Yes, austerity provides strength. Yes, the control of the senses and the mind makes one stronger in the body and otherwise, extra natural, supernatural. But there's a source for that, as there's a source for everything. The ability to do those austerities, where does that come from? And another is the intention behind those austerities, like Amba and her austerities was just, get back. Get Bhishma Dev, kill him. And she became very powerful with incredible austerities and so many other nice examples. So the purpose behind the austerities is important. And when we do austerities, a part of our life, minimally the 4 regular principles are foregoing something and doing something else for the rendering service that's not obstructed by these 4 basic sinful activities. Give strength. But the strength is Krishna Shakti, from Krishna. So Karma is a Vishnu Bhakta. So the magic that he was able to manifest came from Vishnu. It's kind of like storybookish. Once upon a time, and then the story unfolds, and then there was a problem, and then the story further unfolds, and is it real? Just a little, a parallel. On the way to the program yesterday evening, it was a little further away, and we went through some area where there weren't any, it was left side and right side, it was just fields, and then all of a sudden, there's this housing development. We went inside the housing development, and I didn't comment, but I was thinking, this looks like a storybook. Some designer, some architect, or some builder, or developer, or whatever combination, here's a piece of land, and what to do with the piece of land? Make some money. And what's this quality of housing of this size, this many square feet, and blah blah blah. And then there's this house and that house and the other house, like just in the middle of a field, like fairyland. And somebody buys the house, they live in the house, and live happily ever after. Amen. The dream of middle-class America, manifest by some architect and builder that wants money. So anyway, I couldn't help. It looks like a storybook, and the whole material creation is it's a manifestation of desires of living entities. And there are persons who have powers, powers to build and powers to procreate and powers to do things. But the power of those people and the power of karma and the power of devahuti, the power comes from the powerful. So this is a very compelling narration of very exalted personality in Satya Yuga, very early stages of Satya Yuga. And the purpose is, one of the main purposes is to assist Brahma to fill up the universe that he just built. Brand spanking new housing development, populate people in those houses. But it's a different procedure than the modern procedure, that's for sure. So let's see if there's some discussion. Kardamoni and Devahuti.
a comment and a question, Guru Maharaj. I really appreciated the point about being mindful of our intention behind the austerity, because as we leave 1 year behind and we come into a new year, my friends and I have been discussing our resolutions. And while mostly they surround an intention for increased sadhana, the labha, puja, pratishtha often creep in. So I'm appreciating this point. And a question that comes up, Guru Maharaj, I can understand how Devahuti neglected...
What?
Devahuti neglected taking care of her body.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about is the description of uncleanliness or dirt, because we know Vaishnavas really focus on cleanliness and service to Vishnu. So I'm quite bewildered. How come there were these layers of dirt and all this description of dirty clothes?
Yeah. I mean, and something else that doesn't have an answer to it, what about her hair? The hair that's entangled from long neglect. The only thing I know is you shave the hair and they have a bald head and then it grows back. But it didn't say how the hair became unentangled. So there's a little, your question, the other one crossed my mind, your question didn't so much. Because, here's an example. When Vyasadeva was called by Satyavati, he was in an unclean state because he was engaged in austerity. He was in the midst of austerities, and it means neglect. And he didn't look good and he didn't smell good. He was dirty. And that was the condition that he was in when he came before Ambika and Ambalika. And they freaked when they saw this wild man. So I don't exactly understand it. And similarly was Karma Muni in an unclean, cloth is one thing, but body is another thing. Because it doesn't take much to wash a cloth and let it dry. If you have another one to wear that one's drying. We do it all the time, so why they couldn't do it, wouldn't do it, even however simple it is. It's a little puzzling. But it was like standard people that were doing, it seems that it's people that were doing the kinds of austerities that they were doing, there was neglect. To the degree that dirt accumulated, became caked on. I mean, that's really uncomfortable, aside from mochi. So how can you go suchi when you're mochi? I mean, the question is a reasonable question. I don't have an answer. Somehow that was done.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So in the modern age, we see the responsibility.
Little louder.
In the modern age, we see sharing the responsibilities between the wife and husband.
Yeah.
But now we see here in Devahuti as Kartama Muni.
Devahuti is what?
So we see Devahuti serving her husband very intensely. How can we take Devahuti as an example in our lives?
Well, was he serving her very intensely? Get back to the springboard for your question. Commonly, I'm just hearing Prabhupada give this declension, Sanskrit declension of griha. Griha means, and grihastha means one who has a home, and home means wife. He said it like 3 times. Home means wife. Griha means home, home means wife. Without wife, there's no home. You can have another place besides You can have brahmachari ashram or vanaprastha ashram or sannyas ashram, but it's not a home. One could say grihastha ashram, that's a home. Anyway, the word itself indicates or implies, he said it 3 times, with wife. So husband and wife, it's not that, yes, the wife serves husband, and yes, the husband serves wife. Commonly, when there's husband and wife, there's children. So the occupation of husband and wife is involved, at least, to some degree, if not a large degree, with children. And that's grihastha life. So your question was, in this way of Devahuti was serving her husband, how does this apply to us? The other half is not said, but it's, it's their way before the children were generated. They were both qualifying themselves to have quality children. So that's what they were doing together. How does it apply to us? Before your children become qualified to have good children. And you may not do what they did, but at least the principle, how does it apply to us? Qualify oneself. Producing children, or producing offspring, fish and birds and insects and animals, they can do. So we can also do without it. So the distinction is human form of life has some procedures for qualifying that not only to procreate, but to produce good children. That's an application point. It's the duty of those who enter into household life before there are children to qualify. Okay.
I was wondering, in the narration of Devahuti and Karda Muni, it seems that their enjoyment is, from just reading it, it sometimes seems like their enjoyment is not so regulated. And Prabhupada often said that, Grihastha life is a license for regulated sense enjoyment. Like in yesterday's class we were reading that there are rooms for sex life, for sex enjoyment, like that. So someone reading it, a devotee could say, well, it wasn't just for procreation for children. Similarly, it was more than, what was needed, just the opulence. Or so again, I guess the question of example, because their life is often given as an example for us, for grihasthas. It seems more than regulated sense enjoyment. So how do we...
What? Seems more than?
Regulated sense enjoyment. So how do we understand that? Or is that a misreading of it?
Is that a...
misreading of the narration?
You're a thoughtful person, and I'm not capturing the thoughtfulness that you're expressing. So the one is, grihastha life is call it a license for, or sanction for, or regulation for sex life and having children to care for as a result of the sex life. So is it more than that? That's your question. Well, it can be more than that, but it can be simply that. I mean, human form. There's no marriage between cats and dogs, in animals and other entities than humans. So, in different cultures around the world, there's a sanction for marriage, and sometimes it's just the justice of the peace. It's civic, and not so much religious. Prabhupada was speaking on this point just this morning. And one who has sex life outside of marriage is adultery. And there's laws besides religion that indicate that's culpable. So you abide by the law, even if it's not religious. You abide by the law. Then people don't care about the law. So, is there a purpose beyond regulation? For individuals who are broad thinking, there's not so many persons broad thinking, but a broad thinking purpose is a world that's in elevated consciousness, and let me participate in being part of a world that's in elevated consciousness, and then that's another purpose besides a license for restricted sense gratification. Just not exactly a response to your question, but a comment is, Prabhupada would so often, those of that heard his classes, as I have done, so often he would speak about number one attraction on the hit parade is sex life. And why is that? And why his emphasis, and why is it so? Because it's continuation of species. Without continuation of species, life doesn't, it stops. So it's there, it's built in. We're wired. So to have elevation within society, then that wiring needs to be for elevation of society. So besides, I have a license. So anyway, that's an answer, one answer to your question. It's living a human life as opposed to an animal life, and human life is meant for elevation of consciousness, or ultimately God realization. So the closer that principle of the license has a higher purpose than now I have a license to indulge my senses. The higher purpose is creating a world, an atmosphere in the world where higher consciousness prevails. And let me participate in that. That's one angle or one perspective. As opposed to, down. Get a human body and live like an animal. So I'll be lawful enough or religious enough that I'll accept the confines of only within marriage, and then indulge, because now I have a license. So higher purpose. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I just wanted to share some inspiration that came, and wanted to probably hear if you would like to say something about it. This time, hearing about Devahuti from you, this particular verses gave some insight. Initial verses that you discussed, there was the word innocence of Devahuti, how she was innocent. And since then, my thoughts have been evolving about what is that innocence, and I felt her innocence was her focus on serving a Vaishnava, keeping aside all the other possible needs about herself and physical or emotional or psychosocial, all these needs may be there, but her focus on serving a Vaishnava like Kardama Muni seemed to take prominence for years and years and years, and that seemed like was the food. It was like her thriving force, and I felt if that's like childlike innocence, where the child, whatever at that moment, whatever the child wants, rest of the whole world can be there, but the child is focused on what they want. I mean, it's not a great comparison, but Mother Devahuti seems like her innocence was her focus on service. Is this something, is my understanding somewhat relatable, or is it like...
No, was the punchline of your question is
this understanding or insight that I'm having, is this somewhat reasonable understanding?
Sure.
One focuses on one's primary goal of Krishna consciousness, rest of the needs actually fade.
Jiver Swarpaya Nityara Krishna Das. In that mood of Krishna Das, innocence is just Krishna Das. Not this designation, that designation, this position, this facility, that facility, minus, deprivation or extravagance, or doesn't matter. Innocence is this one thing. I mean, it's a nice understanding. And protection. The one who is innocent will be protected. When there's somebody that's capable of protection, an innocent person is protected. That's another feature of that innocence. She placed herself in the care of someone that was her protector, qualified protector.
Thank you for that additional point, Guru Maharaj. It's very important to feel that shelter. And I was thinking, in the setup of Grihastha Ashram, whether it's current day or any time, the one of the activities of Krishna consciousness is, in the Grihastha Ashram setup, is to focus on one's own Krishna consciousness plus supporting or letting go of things that may come in the way of somebody else's, meaning the family member's Krishna consciousness. Itself.
Say this last part again. I think it's important.
So
you focus on your own Krishna consciousness and
be willing to let go of some of the things that may come in between supporting the family's Krishna consciousness.
Things that may come in between. For example,
expectations and this. I don't know, like kind of like a lower needs in relatively lower needs of one of the spouses, or the children. Basically, what I'm trying to probably say is the service in Grihastha Ashram, if it is mainly the innocence here is focusing on one's own and the other person's Krishna consciousness, come what may in between. Just let go and just move on in that path of supporting. Is that maybe my thoughts are just revolving?
Yeah, it sounds good, but I'm not so clear. So, why don't you think some more about it? We'll discuss it tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
See if we can distill it down to something that's simple.
Thank you.
Someone else? Srila Prabhupada ki jai.